Welcome to the Criterion Collection special edition of The Princess Bride. On this track, you'll hear screenwriter William Goldman, producer Andy Scheinman, actors Billy Crystal and Peter Falk, and me, I'm Rob Reiner.
My name is William Goldman, and I wrote the novel, and I wrote the screenplay. And I care very deeply for both, which is unusual in that I don't like my writing. The only two things I've ever written that I like are the movie with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Princess Bride. The genesis of the novel, I have two daughters, and Jenny and Susanna, and when they were little, I used to really make up wonderful stories, and I don't say that easily, but I was just on a hot streak with them. I love telling the stories. And around 1970, I was going to California, and I said to them, I'll write you a story. What do you want it to be about? And one of them said princesses, and one of them said brides. And I said, that will be the title, and it has remained that ever since. I decided to try and write the novel. And I wrote what was then the first chapter, which was about how Buttercup became the most beautiful woman in the world. And then I wrote the second chapter, which is short, which is about how evil Prince Humperdinck is. And then I was dry, which is the great nightmare for everybody that writes. And I remember, I guess it was the most frustrating experience of my writing life, because I had all these things in my head. I didn't know how to get to them. I mean, I had the Duel on the Cliffs of Insanity and all that stuff, and I didn't know how to get there. And I was walking around the city one day, and it was weeks of frustration. And until that time, it was very much a children's book, which is why the names are so dopey. Humperdinck and Buttercup and stuff like that. And then I got the idea, what if it was an abridgment of a novel that was read to me? And I got the idea that my father read it to me when I was sick, and he didn't want to bore me, so he only read me the good parts, which meant I could jump to wherever I wanted to go. And once I had that notion, I had the best writing experience I will ever have.
My father gave me a copy of William Goldman's The Princess Bride, and knowing that I was a big fan of Bill Goldman's, I'd read just about everything he'd ever written, and I absolutely flipped over it. It was probably my favorite book of all time growing up, and as a young adult, it spoke directly to me. And at the time, I never thought about it as a feature film because I wasn't doing that. But as I got older and I started making movies, I thought back at all the books that I had loved over the years, and Princess Bride again came back to me. I reread it and fell in love with it all over again and decided to make it. The way in which the book is framed is so inventive and so clever. The idea that, he talks about himself as the actual William Goldman out in California doing a rewrite for the Stepford Wives, which he actually was a picture that he did. And he was thinking, here he is out in California where his son was about to have his 10th birthday and he wasn't going to be home. And he was all upset about that, and his wife had said that she was going to get him a 10-speed bike, and he didn't know what he was going to get his son for his birthday. And then he thought back and remembered about his favorite book as a child growing up, the S. Morgenstern classic, The Princess Bride. He then called back to New York and talked to his agent at that time, Everett Ziegler, and said, Zig, you got to find a copy of The Princess Bride and get it to my son. He had Everett Ziegler rush down to the village in a blinding snowstorm, get this copy, deliver it to the son just in time for his birthday. Bill Goldman then returns home from California, and he's all kind of nervous to ask his son, what did he think of the book? And the son says, it was okay. And it turns out that the son had only read the first 5 or 10 pages and put it down because it was so boring he couldn't even get through it. And Bill Goldman thought, my God, what is he thinking? I mean, this is the most exciting book I'd ever read as a child. So then he picked up the book and started leafing through it. And as he read it, he realized that he had never actually read the book himself, that the book had always been read to him by his father. And he realized that his father, knowing that he was a young child, would only be interested in the exciting parts. And the 50 pages describing how to pack a trunk, in the age of Gilder and Florin, he left out. So he said, I will present it to you, William Goldman, presenting The Princess Bride, the S. Morgenstern classic, abridged, the good parts version.
Oh, it's all made up. There's a reunion scene in the thing. And I say, if you want a copy of it, I say it's not in the book because of so and so reason. If you want it, send in to whatever it was. I never thought anybody would send in. I mean, I don't know, 10, 15,000 people over the years have sent it. It's just insane. People tend to want to believe that there was a Morgenstern, that I have a fat son, and that I was come from that area. It's all made up. There was a reason for making it all up, but I can't remember what it was.
I'm Andrew Scheinman. I'm Rob Reiner's producing partner. We've been partners for a number of years, and Princess Bride is one of the films we produced together. This was one where Rob had read it, certainly wasn't even thinking about directing at the time, and so he put it out of his mind. And then after we did Sure Thing, and before we started Stand By Me, he said, I read a book a long time ago, and I think it'd be a great movie. And we started getting interested in The Princess Bride. At that time, we had no idea that it had a long and storied Hollywood history.
I wrote the screenplay in 1973 for 20th Century Fox. They liked the book. They didn't know if it was a movie, so they made a strange deal. They bought the book, and I could keep the screenplay rights. And I wrote the screenplay, and they liked it, and they sent me to Dick Lester, who was coming off The Three Musketeers. He had done the Beatles movies. He liked it. We were about to go in 1973, and the guy at Fox, I think it was, got fired. Norman Jewison, who was a huge star then, wanted to do it, but Norman is a very proper Canadian fellow, and he comes out of television. And like a lot of directors from that time, George Roy Hill, Norman Jewison, Sidney Lumet, they hate going over budget. They won't do it. Jewison said he needed 20, and he was only offered 18. And everybody said, lie to them. Stop being so stupid. Say, okay. He said, I can't do it. And so he fell by the wayside. Then Harry Gilliam was interested for a blink. I remember Christopher Reeve was a lovely man I met in London. I think he was interested in playing Wesley. Oh, there are a lot of people. I mean, a lot of directors wanted to do Princess Bride. It became a cult screenplay because a lot of people loved the novel. A lot of people had read the screenplay. And it was just this thing that never was going to happen. But I blocked it. It was such a hideous experience because I loved it so, and I wanted to see it made.
The Princess Bride had been around even as a screenplay, as a film project for close to 15 years before I ever thought of making it into a movie. And at the time, I was kind of a babe in the woods. I didn't really know any of the history of The Princess Bride. And when I called Bill Goldman up, he told me about its past, and it had been published in some film journal as being one of the greatest screenplays never to be produced. And I didn't know anything about this, but apparently at one point, Francois Truffaut was interested in making it. Robert Redford had an option on it for a long time. I think even Barry Manilow was attached to play Wesley at one point.
Bill Goldman had seen Spinal Tap and Sure Thing, and I guess they had passed muster, and he wanted to meet Rob and to see who this upstart was that wanted to hurt his child. And so we went to New York, and we met in Bill's apartment. And
I was shaking in my boots because he was an idol of mine. I had read just about everything that he had written. And I walked in the door with Andy Scheinman, who was my partner at the time. And the first thing out of Bill Goldman's mouth was, "This is my baby. This is the favorite thing I've ever written. I want this on my tombstone. And so basically, let me hear what you have to say about this." And, it was almost like a challenge to me to say, well, how are you going to screw this up? I mean, what are your plans to mess with my child and my favorite child? We sat down, and I had read a couple of the screenplays based on the book, and I felt that in order to do it properly, you'd have to go back to and do it more closely related to what was actually in the book. So I started telling him what I felt needed to be done, which was to get back to his original material.
I'd say the first half hour he was defensive, and about 2 hours into it, he was so excited, and he was saying, "Oh, so we cut the bottom of 5. Okay, great. And we move over here and we do this. Okay, that's terrific. Well, let me go get some coffee." And he ran out of the room, and Rob and I said, "Boy, this is really going well, isn't it?" And Bill came back and said, "This is really going well, isn't it?" And from that minute on, we've had a really great relationship through the entire Princess Bride process, and Misery, and recently on Absolute Power.
The odd thing about, the 3 cohorts, Fezzik and Inigo and Vizzini, they're such specific characters, and they're so specifically described in the book and in the script. There are very few people that can play these parts. I mean, start with Fezzik. I mean, it's a giant, so it's not like you throw a stick and hit 50 giants. For Vizzini, he's described as a tiny little man, who's brilliant, and has this great steel trap of a mind. And Wally Shawn, is this tiny little man who's brilliant, and is very verbal and can, can pull off the scene with a battle of wits scene that comes. To get Inigo Montoya, we needed a guy who could be physical and be able to fence, and also, have a Spanish accent, and also was intense, and because he was looking for to avenge the death of his father. And Mandy Patinkin fit that part perfectly. I mean, Kevin Kline would have been the other guy, and those are the only 2 I would think that could play that part.
For a number of these people, the casting was done in Rob's head. We didn't even see people, basically. Rob knew, as far as I can remember, he knew he wanted Chris Guest. He knew he wanted Mandy Patinkin. He knew he wanted Peter Falk.
I'll tell you, on Princess Bride, I knew 2 things about this project. I had read the scenes between myself and the kid. They were lovely, lovely, lovely scenes. And he was a very likable character, and the kid was very, very likable. And they were charming and well-written. And Rob Reiner was directing it. And like everyone else, I was familiar with Rob's work as a director and obviously as an actor. And that's all I needed. I didn't need anything else.
And then Peter Falk was one of the first, was like a first choice. I mean, he was like a perfect kind of grizzly grandfather who also had a great sense of humor and has a sense of, satire and, this kind of edginess that the character needed.
What I do remember about it is that I went and got there early in order to put on makeup for the character. Not totally comfortable with that makeup, but I didn't say anything. And then Rob came in and he saw it and he said, "Take that off." Do you know what that sound is, Reiner? Those are the shrieking eels.
We cast him to play a grandfather, and he thought, I don't think, he says, "Rob, I don't know if I'm old enough to be a grandfather, maybe I need to get a little prosthetics, some makeup, to make me look older." And I thought, well, gee, he is, old enough to be the grandfather of an 9-year-old. But, I didn't want to tell him that. So I said, "Okay, Peter, we'll get you the prosthetics." We designed these prosthetics for him. And at the time, they weren't so developed in those days. They're not as good as they are now. And we did makeup tests, and we filmed them, and we sat there in the screening room and looked at it. And Peter looked at it. He says, "Geez, I look like a burn victim." He says, and I said, "Peter, what would you think about not going with the prosthetics at all and just going with your face? We'll gray your hair up a little bit." He says, "Rob, I think you're onto something."
The cliff face was in Ireland. I think it's called the Cliffs of Moher, and it's the highest cliff in the British Isles. We decided to shoot in England because with the budget we had, as well as the location demands we had, there really was no other place. We needed castles. We needed countryside that was unique to England, and the location selected itself. We really had almost no other alternative. A lot of it was shot in the studio. The fire swamp was built. The Cliffs of Insanity, the sword fight on top of the Cliffs of Insanity was an interior. And then they were cut into actual exteriors in England. And there were no computer graphics at the time where you could just build cliffs 10,000 feet high and have your actor on them. I mean, you had to actually do it much more inventively.
I'm looking at the Cliffs of Insanity now. I'm trying to figure out how they did that.
We put a stuntman in a black outfit and and lowered him from an enormous building crane, hundreds of feet down, to get the long shots. And then we had another guy wearing Andre's clothes with dummies for the other people, and he's pulled by a cable, so he could go as fast as the cable guy pulled him up. But it had a great effect, which was that he was so strong that he could just pull himself up. But there was no animation. That was all done with stuntmen and cranes.
Andre was my dream because during all the years between 70 and 86, when the movie was not happening, or 73 and 86, I would go to the garden. I discovered Andre on television. I saw him, and I thought, oh, he's so perfect for Fezzik.
We all knew we wanted Andre the Giant. Problem was, Andre was, we were told, wrestling somewhere in Japan and couldn't be reached. So we went about the process of trying to find another giant. And that was probably the most interesting casting adventure for any character in any film I've ever been involved with, because to try and find a real-life giant that could also act a little bit is not as easy as it sounds. And I'm sure it doesn't sound very easy. At the time, this fellow named Jeff Capes had the title The World's Strongest Man. I think he had moved a 747 from a standing start with a harness. So I guess I wasn't a terrible burden on his back, but I remember jumping on his back and feeling like I was just on a wall or something. And just sitting there thinking, what are we doing for a living? What am I doing? I'm a grown man, and I'm riding around on a 7.5-foot tall guy's back. So that was an interesting experience, made more interesting when we finally got word that Andre was in Paris.
So we literally, we booked a flight to Paris, and we said, we'll meet him at the George Cinq Hotel at 2:00. So we walked into the hotel, and somebody, one of the guys from the manager, somebody came up to us and said, there's a man waiting for you at the bar. We walked in, and there was a man waiting. There was, as described in the book and in the screenplay, a landmass was sitting on a bar stool. I mean, it was the biggest person I'd ever seen in my life sitting there. And we said hello, and he was very sweet. And we said, well, you know, you come up to the room and we'll have you audition and read a part. He went up to the room, and we gave him a scene that was about 3 pages long to read. And he really couldn't read. He didn't read English that well. I mean, he'd have to learn the part. But we told him what he had to do, and he read a couple of lines in the 3 pages. And I said to him, you know, I thought, we're not going to find another giant. It's not like we, you know, like I say, you know, there's not 50 giants out there. So if this guy can't do it, I don't know who's going to do it. I said to him, listen, you know, this part requires you being in London for 15 weeks to the course of the shoot. And he said to me, I do these 3 pages, 15 weeks for these 3 pages for the scene. I said, no, you're in the whole movie. This is just a one scene. He thought that, you know, for 15 weeks, he'd have to do the same scene 3 pages over and over again. He didn't know what was going on. I said, well, you know, we'll think about it and we'll give you a call. And as he walked out of the room, he said, I hope you choose me. And I looked at Andy after he left, and I said, you know, we got to go with this guy. I mean, you know, who else are we going to get? I mean, plus he's perfect. He's exactly the description, you know, that's called for in the film.
I'm Billy Crystal, and I was fortunate enough to be Miracle Max in the wonderful movie The Princess Bride. I thought that Mandy Patinkin should have been nominated, at least nominated, for an Oscar for his performance in The Princess Bride. I thought he's spectacular. I thought he was charismatic and a throwback to those great dueling movies of the 40s and, you know, the Errol Flynns, and just a part of his life, you know, and I just thought he carried the picture and was sensational in it.
And, you know, this is the one relationship that, you know, people remember most about the movie. You know, when people quote The Princess Bride, they talk about Inigo Montoya and, you know, you killed my father, prepare to die, you know, all of that. I was having dinner one night at a restaurant in New York City, an Italian restaurant, which I was told was the hangout of John Gotti, the mafia don. And I wanted to go because I wanted to see. And I walked in and sat down, and in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, sure enough, John Gotti walks in with all of these wise guys and sitting at the front table. And you know, we ate our dinner. I was with Nora Ephron and Nick Pileggi. We ate our dinner. We walked out of the restaurant, And the first guy I see is this big Luca Brasi looking type of guy standing by the limo. And he looks at me and he goes, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Like this. I almost defecated in my pants. I was so nervous. He was some thug who had seen Princess Bride, and he was just quoting one of the lines to me, but I thought I was going to kill me.
He slept a year before he was done.
Oh, I thought Mandy Patinkin was fabulous in the picture. I couldn't get enough of him. Could watch him forever. He got stronger and stronger in that picture, and by God, by the last half of that picture, he was right on target on every line, every gesture. I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, Mandy's a brilliant actor. Mandy's very hard on himself. Arguably, I think, the best singer we have now. He's a fabulous singer. He's a brilliant, I mean, one of the great triumphs of Barbra Streisand's career is that she could do Yentl and have Mandy in it, whether or not have him sing. I mean, I just don't understand. Anyway, he gives concerts all around the country now. And he said that when he's done, he says, "Okay, I'll do it once." And everybody screams, and he says, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die." Hello, hello. I mean, that moment works so well in the movie, so even though you lose the backstory, it has to hold.
You go up to the six-fingered man and say, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Bill Goldman, when he writes probably the most interesting stage direction of any writer. In fact, at one time, Rob and I went in, and Guy McElwain, who was running Columbia at the time, said, "Don't let Bill Goldman trick you with good writing," which we always laughed about. But what he meant was the stage direction is so entertaining that you could easily think that the film is better than it is. One of the things he did, and it takes him 2 seconds to write, Buttercup, the most beautiful woman in the world, then you have to go find the most beautiful woman in the world. He also put, "We are about to see the second greatest sword fight in the history of film. The first comes later." So that probably took him 30 seconds to 40 seconds to write, and then somehow we had to figure out how to do the greatest sword fight in film. I'm not saying this is that, but it is a very good sword fight.
In fact, it is the best fencing. I mean, I very rarely say something, positive about what I've done. But I looked at every single fencing scene in every single Hollywood movie. There's not one that comes even remotely close to the first fencing scene that happens here in Princess Bride.
They were both so obsessed, Perry and Mandy, that whenever they were on the set and they weren't shooting, they would practice fencing. And they went at it, I can't tell you how many hours. I don't think we'd planned it that way. They just got so good. And it's very hard because you're dueling right-handed and left-handed, and the swords are heavy. But they worked very, very hard on it. And it's a wonderful sequence.
These guys practiced for months and months. After every take, no matter what scene they were doing, they would run outside and practice because they had to fight left-handed and right-handed. It wasn't just fencing, but it was comedy and it was action and it was, you had to blend them all together. And I think these guys were extraordinary. There wasn't one shot that wasn't the two of these guys. They did every second of the fencing themselves.
There are no doubles used in any of the sword play. The wide shots, the close-ups, every single frame of sword play is the actual two people doing it. Now, we use doubles for those flips, when they do those acrobatic flips, but that's not sword play. That's, acrobatics. This is one of my favorite lines in the movie, and nobody ever hears it because they're laughing. He says, "Who are you?" He says, "Nobody of consequence." He says, "I must know." He says, "Get used to disappointment." It's a great, it's that kind of, tongue-in-cheek stuff that Bill Goldman's so great at. Now watch this here. This was a great stunt. We had to build a hard mat because there's somebody up there dropping the sword. One sword flies, and then another sword has been dropped in his hand, so it looks like he's catching it. Now watch what Carrie does here. He's got the sword in his right hand. You'll notice, right? He's got the sword in his right hand, switches to his left, and back to the right. See that? It's really great sword play. And that's it.
Kill me quickly.
I will soon destroy a stained glass window as an artist like yourself. However, since I can't have you following me either. Please
So
understand.
wonderful. I sound like an idiot. I don't like most of the movies I'm involved with. I really like Butch, and I really like this. I think they're wonderful flicks. They're wonderfully directed, and they look great, and the story holes and all that stuff.
Inconceivable!
Andre weighed close to 500 pounds, and he was trying to lose 100 and something pounds. And I said, you'll be a rail at 400 pounds. You'll be so slender. And he would always laugh. And but he had a hard time doing some of the physical things in the picture. As a tremendous presence as he is, he couldn't do some of the things in the movie, which made him even more appealing to the crew. He was said, no, let him wrestle him. I think in the scene where he throws the rock at the man in black, if you notice, he goes down to pick up the rock and he has to support himself. Bends down and holds a boulder to bend down. Even his back was bothering him, and then they hug each other. He grabs him and hugs him. And I think that's not Andre in one of the wrestling scenes.
In this fight, we had Andre the Giant, one of the world's great professional wrestlers, who unfortunately at the time had a bad back. So we had to work all kinds of doubles and tricks to make this sequence work. When he had to carry him on his back, we had to get a stuntman who put on prosthetic hands, because Andre's hands are so oversized, they're so unique, and huge boots and everything else. And it became a somewhat difficult sequence to film.
Your favorite hand fighting.
It's my fault being the biggest and the strongest. I don't even exercise.
There you could see the real size difference between Carrie, who's 6 feet tall, and Andre.
Well, Andre the Giant was, he was a good guy, actually. People, he became a bad guy towards the end of his career. But most of his career, he was a good guy. And he was this likable giant. And they would send, 2 and 3 people or, 6 midgets half through and stuff like that. And, he was a professional wrestler for like 20, 22 years. So he was loved all over the world. People loved him. By the time he left the, professional wrestling, really starting to take off in a big way.
That's the stunt double. That's Andre, but Carrie's standing on a plank there. And we figured of all the scenes, the one thing Andre could do was wrestle. And it was he couldn't do it because his back hurt so badly. So you never know where the problems are going to come from. The least expected. See, that was a double. Anytime you go wide and he's suspended on his back, Andre literally couldn't hold him.
Carrie never actually hung on his body because he couldn't even support the weight of Carrie. He had injured it over the years, so many years of punishment. He had basically just destroyed his back. But, kids loved him or hated or scared of him. And he never, kids would come up to him and just want to, look at him and touch him, or other kids would look at him and run in the other direction. When Robin Wright first saw him, she ran in the other direction. She couldn't believe how big he was. You'll see Carrie do a little thing where he takes his foot under his sword and he flips his sword up to himself. And Carrie, thought of that when we were right on the set there, that little move there. And now, of course, my son can do that. My 5-year-old son does that.
It was mighty doing.
That's the Army of Florin up there. And that was definitely a budgetary decision. We were going around trying to set up the film. I said, well, you can't do this for under $30 million. I said, there's no way with all the armies and the horses. And Rob goes, well, no. The Army of Florin is 8 guys. There they are. That's the army. And, no one, because of the great whimsy and the involving story, no one said, well, that's an army, and it always amused me that the great forces were out to get them. There was 7 or 8 guys. Now, in fact, if they caught them, I guess that would be enough.
I don't know if people today would make The Princess Bride. Unless it had super huge stars in it and special effects and Rob made this movie for $17 million. I remember when it was up higher than that, they said, "Well, look at this nighttime scene alone." He goes, "What nighttime scene? Look, it's daytime." Well, you got 45 soldiers, 50. So what? I got 4 soldiers. Look at that. And then kept paring it down and down. And it has a very rich, great look about it.
It was very difficult to finance this film. First of all, I mean, it had been budgeted at like 35 million. We're talking about in 1986, and even prior to that, probably in the early 80s, late 70s, it had been budgeted between 30 and 35 million at a studio. We had 16 million to make the film, 16 and a half million. And at the time, Norman Lear, his company Embassy, had been sold to Coca-Cola. So he retained the rights to The Princess Bride personally. He had them, and he wanted to make the picture. So basically, he went on the hook personally for the money. I mean, he financed the picture himself, and he didn't have the wherewithal to put up all $16 million. So at that point, my salary was $1 million. I cut $500,000 out of the cast budget, and I gave him $500,000 of my own money. And then he said, "Okay, you can go make the picture." And I was ready to leave for England on Saturday, and we had already started pre-production, and I think we had spent already about $2.5 million in construction costs over in London. And he was still thinking about pulling the plug, and I was ready to leave the next day, Saturday, to go to England for 6 months. And I still didn't get the go ahead. And then Saturday morning, I wake up and I said to Norman, I said, "Well, what's the answer?" And he went, "Oh, okay, go." I mean, it was very begrudging, but I think he was happy. He was happy with the end result.
I'm not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you must have known I was not a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
You made your decision then?
I'm sitting in a room with Rob and Andy and the casting person. And Wally Shawn sticks his head in and says, oh my, there are so many of you. I don't think you want me. And he closes the door. And then he came in and he said, "I'm wrong for this." And he has that wonderful little speech impediment. And he was just he was just miraculously right for it. And it was a wonderful piece of casting.
Fun about the fairy tale element of this film is that there really weren't any rules. So when Wally Shawn comes in to play Vizzini, the wily Sicilian, and he's struggling with his Sicilian accent, Rob goes, "You know what? This Sicilian talked with an American accent." And that's how he talked. And it worked fine. It's just, that was who this particular guy happened to be.
He had been in My Dinner with Andre, I believe, at that point. He had been also in a Woody Allen film. I think he was in Manhattan. He had a hard time with this scene, and he was convinced after we shot this that I was, that night desperately on the phone trying to reach Hollywood to find another actor to replace him. I mean, he's a very insecure guy. I thought he did a great job, but he was so insecure. He thought, "Oh my God, they hate me. They're gonna kick me out of the movie." And I thought he was great, absolutely great.
I knew in the very beginning that I had how wants to get out of it. I knew they were both poisoned because whatever. And this is a long scene in the book, and it's a long, bloody scene here. It just goes on and on and on. And it works for whatever. I don't know why it works, but it does. I guess the point I'm fumbling is you never know what's going to work and what doesn't. Things that you think will seem fine don't. And ultimately, when you look at the faces of the actors, if you don't have people of that quality, it's not going to work. Ultimately, Wally Shawn is a wonderful playwright. He is not really Vizzini. He's not really going to kill Robin Wright. But you've got to believe all that stuff. Now, here comes a moment in the movie when she looks at him that's tricky, because we were always worried, would she recognize? In the book, it's okay. But in the movie, it's not, and she just doesn't, because we figure she's under duress or something. I don't know. See, one thing about Robin is, Robin's not dumb, and she doesn't play dumb. So some of the dumb things that Buttercup does when she's fooled and stuff, you can forgive her. You know, she gets away with it.
Suffering in Gilder if she dies.
Robin is the astonishing figure in the movie for me because she was 20, man, and she was just unbelievably beautiful and could act. Not very often that happens.
Robin did such a good job that despite the fact that she was on a American soap called Santa Barbara, I guess those who didn't know her from that called after the film to see if Robin had the potential to do an American accent. And having grown up, I think, in Texas and San Fernando Valley for a while, we thought she had the talent to pull that off. But she actually does a very good British accent, and she does a wonderful Irish accent, which she's shown subsequent to this, and a very talented actress, much more than a pretty face.
I mean, the whole thrust of this section of the film is all about Wesley testing Buttercup's loyalty. He's trying to discover whether or not she's been faithful to him, and he knows that she's agreed to marry Prince Humperdinck. And he's tough with her. I mean, he's very tough with her in this. He's ready to smack her in this scene here. I mean, it's pretty harsh stuff for a fairy tale. When Chris Sarandon came in and read, he gave a great reading, and we thought, wow, he's perfect.
If it was a big budget movie now, you'd get Alan Rickman to play the part or something like that and pay him a lot of money to be a villain again. One of the things about Chris is so handsome that it was nice that he played that. I mean, it's not what the book was, but I thought he was terrific. He's a wonderful looking man.
There weren't enough Errol Flynns floating around, which is what we needed, a young Errol Flynn. And in fact, we saw no one in the U.S. that we thought could be Wesley, Man in Black. And we met all the actors we could see in England. And in fact, Carrie was shooting a film in East Germany, I believe. And it was just after the Chernobyl thing. And I, for one, was looking at the papers to see where the fallout from Chernobyl was supposedly spreading. It was right over East Germany, too. And then, but I gave in, and we all flew over to East Germany and read Carrie in a little hotel room, and it was 2 words in, and you said, oh, this is the guy. And I think often there's one person who can do the role great, and until you find that person, you just don't feel like you have anything. And then when that person walks in the door, it's like magic. And it's not always, but in this case, I think Carrie was the only person that we saw that would have done justice to this.
Carrie was 23 when we made this picture. And we met Carrie. I'd seen a picture called, I guess it was Lady Jane that he made. And I thought, well, he's perfect. I mean, he looks right for the part, and he's a good actor. But does he have a sense of humor? And I met with him, and he was like, he could imitate Eddie Murphy. He could imitate, I mean, he was like incredibly facile comedically, and he got it right away. So I knew he was our man. And then we went to look for Buttercup, and, the part calls for the most beautiful girl in all the land. And we had a real hard time finding an English actress who was, 20 years old, who could act, who was, knocked down dead beautiful. And we read a lot of people, and then Jane Jenkins brought in Robin Wright, who was on a series at the time, Santa Barbara, and she came in and she read, and she just knocked us out. I mean, she was like perfect. I mean, she was gorgeous, and here she was, born in Texas, raised in the San Fernando Valley, but had a perfect English accent because it turns out her father was English, so she had that in her ear.
You could die too, for all I care.
Oh, as you wish.
Oh, sweet Wesley, what have I done? Ow.
That guy, that's a man there rolling down the hill there, woman's dress. Yeah, but Robin Wright, like many actresses, is very shy. I mean, I think most actors and actresses are shy. They're shy people because, and that's the reason they become actors, because it's a chance to express themselves when they're safely ensconced in a character, and they have lines that are supplied for them. When they have to, left to their own devices and stripped naked, they become very uncomfortable and awkward and shy.
The movie, I think, is really probably the last third of the book, because that's when the narrative really kicks in. It really kicks in. Wesley's got a disappears, so and so and so and so. I mean, it really starts once he kidnaps her. And it's basically, movies are a narrative, and the narrative, there's a lot of stuff that isn't narrative, and it goes out. It just, basically, you can't have it. You can't have it in the movie because the audience just gets bored.
The Princess Bride was a fractured fairy tale. Played seriously, with great wit and great fun, with a little wink at the form. And I think that's what's so charming about it.
What is it? What's the matter?
Kissing.
Oh, Invitation to Happiness. My God, all the kisses. I'm a sports nut, and it was a preview. I never thought you could cheat in previews. I was like 8, and it was a boxing movie, and it was in the middle of the week, and I made my mother take me. And it was a kissing movie that kept kissing, and I couldn't believe it. I think there were 23 kisses. I just lay there groaning, waiting for the prize fight action. Kissing is just in real life, it's not so terrible. Hugging and kissing, all that stuff, not bad. I can screw up a shot. I'll hide in a corner to try and get out of the way on a shot, and they'll say, Bill, could you move? That's where the shot goes. And I'll say, oh, I didn't know. But I mean, I just have an amazing ability to be able to screw up where the shot is going.
He would sit there and he would contort himself into positions and cross his fingers. Every take would be, like the most important thing in the world. And I would look at him over there and I said, Bill, what are you doing? He says, it's a superstition. It's a superstition. It's like, when people watch sports, guys watch sports, don't move out of that position, because if you move, you cross your legs, the Yankees are going to, score, or the Yankees won't score, So he had all kinds of positions he was contorting himself in and sticking fingers in his mouth and doing all kinds of things to make sure that it would go well. And Bill Goldman was all worried. He says, I can't believe it. The first day of shooting, we're setting the leading lady on fire. I said, well, it's the way the schedule laid, So that was the first day of shooting, when you see her walk in like that, first day we shot.
I am on the set, this moment, okay? This moment right when she flames. I wrote the novel. In the novel, her dress gets on fire. I wrote the screenplay. Every version of the screenplay, her dress gets on fire. It's the first take. They're going through the fire swamp. The spurt happens. I'm standing there watching. Her skirt goes on fire. I scream. Her dress is on fire. It totally blew the shot. It was just one of those amazing moments. I mean, I never felt more stupid in my life than when I said that, because it was just it's why I'm not around sets very much.
This was built from scratch, and then torn down, and the sequence on the high seas was filmed in the same studio, because there was a tank. This was one of the studios that had a tank, so we filled it with water. This was built just for this sequence.
About saying please was true. It intrigued Roberts, as did my description of your beauty.
Adrian Biddle shot this, and he's a great cinematographer. And the idea was always that the story of The Princess Bride was always going to be very saturated. The colors are going to be, very saturated.
I mean, this is really a wonderful crew we have. I mean, they're all having wonderful careers, and they all cared. It was terrific. Adrian, one of the nice things was everybody basically was servicing the story. Rob and Adrian and cinematographer, everybody was. One of the awful things that happens, we're all of us in the same thing when a movie works. Sometimes I don't like, for example, seeing any discipline stand out. I don't like seeing great cinematography. It takes me away from the story. I don't like seeing great production design. It takes me away from the story. This was a wonderful set. This was really great to be around. There were a bunch of little kids, little boys, around 6, 8 years old, and they'd climb on the set. It was wonderful. It was a very loose shoot. I was so thrilled after all these years of waiting, and it was so jinxed. I mean, it was a small studio, the day the studio closed, and that was going to be the next movie, I just said it was never going to happen. It was just clearly a jinx thing. So I had no idea. I just was so happy the movie existed as a document of something I loved.
Someone else. Is everything clear to you?
I think we just dropped her through some sand. It was not a happy thing, I think, is what we did. Right? It was really Robin going down there.
And then this was, Carrie Elwes, wanted to do this stunt himself, to dive in there. And we said, no, don't do it. You can kill yourself, because underneath this was a contraption where you had to duck your head in very quickly to avoid the iron mechanism underneath this thing. And Carrie, of course, did it and almost killed himself. There's the first rodent of unusual size. There are little people inside there. Little people in big rat suits.
Well, if you can't have fun making a movie, then something's wrong. What a great job we have. I mean, look at this. There's people getting pulled out of sand pits and little rodents of unusual size, which are these little English little people. That's what Andre talked about. So we were in lunch, and this guy in half a rodent's costume walked by, and he was explaining about his mortality. And he said, Bill, big people, little people, we get gypped. Maybe I get 250. And it takes your breath away, What? Oh, yeah. Yeah. You ever see Old Giant? So you can't have fun doing this kind of movie, or any movie you do. You should just get out, because this is really an amazing job.
Watching Rob direct them was, in fact, funny, because they couldn't quite see what the nature of the suit was. They would look out the bottom, and they would be walking on all fours, in effect. And it was, okay, now act fiercer. And you hear this tiny British accent. I thought I was fierce. I mean, it's not fierce enough.
One guy who could fight better, and one guy who could run better. And I needed one to run quick. And they said, well, let's get Anthony. I said, no, we need the other guy. He says, no, it'll be good with him. With Anthony, it'll be good with Anthony. I said, well, where's the other guy? He says, well, he didn't show up. He's in a very, very contentious divorce settlement, and his wife came and burned down this kennel, or he burned down his wife's kennel or something. One of them owned a dog kennel, and they burnt it down, and he got stuck in jail or something, and he didn't make it to the set that day.
And then Rob, I remember Rob, telling me on the phone, we would talk. I was in L.A., and he said, "Oh God, you should have seen me today. There's this poor guy inside this rat suit." And I'm hearing him inside going, "Mr. Reiner, do you want me to quickly scurry, or how should I scurry over here?" And I'm talking to a guy in a rat suit, And he told me one of the little guys, the little person it's a line I've since used in a movie. He said, he's all pierced. He's got all these earrings and stuff. I go, ooh, he looks like a fishing lure. And I used it in City Slickers too, I think, about describing a boyfriend.
All of the noises made by the rodents of unusual size were made by me. Every noise that you hear emanating from this rodent of unusual size is something that I did. Yeah, I always take a part in the film.
I remember when we killed the rodent of unusual size, nobody who's around the movie business is very impressed with blood, because it's only a matter of having a good blood man and how big is your budget. And when we killed the rodent, we didn't know how bloody we wanted it. So Rob just kept having it stabbed and stabbed. They said, let's have more blood this time. So we have all kinds of versions of how bloody the rodent of unusual size is. And I think in the final movie, it's not bloody at all. There's just a stab and a scream. I'll bet you those are our leaves. I don't know. It's one of the things you do when you're trying to make fall. You just buy leaves by the barrel or by the. But it's really true in movies.
Don't make yourself a fool.
I love surprises in books and movies, and I hate them in real life. God, I'm just go to pieces. But I love them in books. I do. I like them as a reader if they're honorable, if they're properly prepared. Sometimes you lose them terribly when you switch from a book. I remember. There's some terrific twists. Some twists I worked very hard on in Marathon Man in the novel that don't work. And there's some neat twists in the movie in the Book of Magic which don't work in the movie. But you just lose them.
He is a sailor on the pirate ship Revenge. Promise to return him to his ship.
I swear it will be done.
When does she say I can live without love? It's when she leaves him in the fire zone. I mean, that's so horrible. And it's not so soft. But here he has done all this stuff for her, and she dumps him. So cruel. God. It's just the most horrible thing that ever happened. Dumping this guy. Think what he's done to rescue her. Come back from the dead, all that stuff.
Come, sir. We must get
Picking Chris Gast to play Rugen, he's Basil Rathbone. That's who would play this part. And Chris, with that wonderful deadpan in this movie, is like an evil Buster Keaton, And
I know Rob just said, Chris, what do you think? Is there something in here for you? I mean, he just knew Chris could do it. There were no other people considered. He just said, here, do this.
If we'd made this movie during the great days of Metro, I don't know who it would have been. It would have been George Sanders as Rugen and Errol Flynn. He was a Warner star, but it would have been Errol Flynn and probably Olivia de Havilland. I don't know. Who would not have been the best Buttercup, but...
The one thing I hated losing most of all was the Zoo of Death. The problem was, even though it was full of excitement and adventure, we had a very small budget, and it would have added probably another $1 million to $2 million to the budget. It's interesting. I mean, after that, we saw the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there was going to be this big fight with whips or something like that, and Harrison Ford, I guess, had a cold that day or had the flu, and they had 4 days of shooting plan. They said, well, what the heck, they'll just pull out a gun and shoot him. So we felt, all right, we'll just put him in the pit of despair, and then we'll, have him tortured, and then Fezzik will come down, they'll rescue him and take him to Miracle Max. And it collapses a little bit, and rather than having him to fight his way out of the Zoo of Death, which would have been fun, but very expensive. Children love the film, but adults love it. I think more adults love this or get more out of the film, certainly, than children, although it's certainly a movie that you can take your kids to. And the audiences that we wound up getting were very young kids and their parents. And oddly enough, I always felt that the prime audience for this film, and the screenings that we had bore that out, was the kids who were still interested in Mad Magazine and Saturday Night Live and the Letterman mentality crowd, because there's a hypness to it. There's a satirical aspect to this thing. I always felt that was our audience. And when we screened it for college audiences, we by far had the best response of any screenings we ever had. And yet we could never, ever get one single teenager, one single person in their early 20s to come see this movie. Not one.
Princess Bride did not work commercially nearly as well as it should have because it was sold atrociously, not by evil people, because they didn't know how to sell it. It tested sensationally with audiences, and it should have been the number 2 movie commercially the year after Back to the Future. Didn't do that. Audience didn't know what it was, and it was very badly sold. They simply had no idea how to sell it. They should have sold it, I think, probably as a comedy, because I think it delivers as a comedy. But when they try to tell you all the things that it was, and when you're dealing with mixed media, when you're dealing with funny, sad, or whatever it is, it's always a problem. And but people don't know why movies work or don't work. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Every time I read in Variety that Independence Day worked because people want a return to patriotism. Oh, I want to just start digging. Oh, come on, it's bullshit. They have no idea it's madness. If they knew that much, why did they make The Fan, which is going to lose $75 million? Do you think they said, oh, good, let's lose $75 million? They thought it was going to be a hit. They don't know. Nobody knows anything.
We looked at several trailers and that Fox had done, and we didn't really like them, and they didn't particularly like them. And with about 2 weeks to go, Rob and Bill Goldman and I think Martin Schaefer and I were up in Rob's dining room making up ads, literally 2 weeks before the film came out. So it was bizarrely almost a mom and pop ad campaign. It was never a very cohesive effort. Then after the film came out and it was so widely enjoyed by those who did see it, and I think the critics were I think it was pretty well received as well. By the time it got to video and it got to cable, people were already excited to see it. And that's when it really grew in awareness and popularity. And it's one of those films that kids would watch 20 and 30 times. And so by osmosis, parents were seeing it and enjoying it.
It was 10 days till the wedding. The king still lived, but Buttercup's night...
There's a line she has coming up that I just love. She enters the room and says, "It comes to this." It's her first line, and she's in that gorgeous robe.
It comes to this.
The costume designer in this film, Phyllis Dalton, was a great costume designer who did Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. So she had a few solid credits. I thought she would be able to do the job.
One of the great things about England is there's just an enormous depth of talent, and yet it's not an incredibly thriving film industry. So your choices for special effects, for makeup people, for fencing masters you really can choose among the best in the world. You know, you say, well, what makeup did you? Well, I did Dr. Zhivago, and I did Lawrence of Arabia, and I did this and that. And you go, well, okay, you're okay. And they're there, and there aren't films to work on. So when you go over there, you get an added bonus of a great talent pool.
I suggest a deal. You write 4 copies of a letter.
Sting was somebody that I thought about for that part, but he didn't want to do it.
And we hadn't thought of Chris for this, and his manager called and said, "No, what about Chris for Humperdinck?" Well, that's interesting. I mean, sometimes you don't think of someone in a certain way, and so it never crosses your mind. If someone else puts that thought in your head, and then you just think of that person in a different way, and you go, "Yeah, that could be."
He was in Dog Day Afternoon. He played Al Pacino's lover in this great scene when he calls him up on the telephone and he tries to talk him into coming out of the bank. It's a really great scene. He had done a number of other things. Chris Guest, I just like to work with him anytime I can get it. Anytime there's a part that I can put him in, I love to work with him. He's a great actor. And the funny thing about Chris Guest is that he's so good in the movie and he loses himself in every part he plays. And I remember we had an early screening, and we had dinner afterwards, and we were all sitting around. Mandy was there, I think Carrie, Andy Scheinman, Bill Goldman, and Chris was sitting there. And we were all, it was after the screening, and we were all having dinner. And I kept thinking, I was looking over to Chris, I kept thinking, isn't it nice of Chris to come to the dinner? He didn't have to come. And I went, what am I, crazy? The guy's in the movie. I would lose sight of the fact that he was in the movie because he got so lost in the part.
Get some rest. If you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything.
This is the day I arrived in London. I saw them shoot this scene. I'm literally now about 20 feet from Chris. And I had no idea the production values, what it was going to look like, or, so on for the movie. And when I saw this great set, when they were torturing Carrie, I went, oh, this is going to be fun.
I tend to write torture scenes. I just had to try to figure out something that was sucking your life away was the worst thing I could think of. And I just came up with it. I was terrified by a dentist in Evanston, Illinois in the late 30s who didn't believe in Novocaine. And in Marathon Man, I had, if you saw the movie, Laurence Olivier tortures Dustin Hoffman by drilling on his teeth. I was out of the country when Marathon Man opened in New York. And I went to see it 2 nights after I got back at a huge theater in Times Square. It was packed. And the movie's going along. I hadn't seen it. And it was really pretty neat, blah, 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 blah. And suddenly I realized the audience hated the movie so much that we're fleeing. Because I looked, the aisles were filled with people leaving the theater. And I thought, my God, it's not that bad. There's great stuff. And then I looked, and the dental scene was coming up. And I realized as they came back after the dental scene was over, that everybody had heard about the dental scene and had chosen then to go get popcorn and pee because they didn't want to see it. Anyway, no, I will never forget that shock of seeing literally hundreds of people, seeing the aisles packed with people fleeing what you've written. Anyway, I am only famous in one place in this world, and that is dentist offices. There is hardly a dentist in the Eastern or Western world who does not hate me because of the Marathon Man dental scene. I was having a root canal in L.A. He said, have you written any movies that I might have heard of? And he's towering over me. And it's a railroad car flat of nothing but root canal guys. And I finally thought, to hell with it. I said, Marathon Man, the book and the movie. And he paused in mid-swipe and went away. And then he came back and finished the job. And when I left, all the root canal men in all their offices were peering out to look at me. That was the one time I ever really was a star. But I mean, the scene hit something, the Marathon Man dental scene, because it's had a life for 20 years now. You know, people are afraid of Dennis.
Rob has one of the great senses of humor and timing of anybody I've ever met, and definitely of anyone I've ever worked with. And when you see him with Carl, you know where that came from and how their relationship has helped, form this amazing sense of timing that he has. Also, I think when you grow up the child of a superstar like Carl was and is, and I don't mean just in popularity, but in talent, that's pretty hard. And I think that was in a way, sometimes I know it was painful for him and he's talked openly about it, but I think it was a good thing that it drove him to do, not better, but it drove him to be different. It drove him to be, Rob's a different director than Carl is. Rob is a different creative talent than Carl is. But yet all of that stuff, all of that greatness, all of that inventiveness and brilliance of vision and timing that Carl has as a writer and as a comedian and as a comic actor has infused Rob with a very rare quality. You watch Rob, and I've worked with him as a director, when he's directed me, and as an actor, we've acted together. And he hears the music of the dialogue, and he hears the math of it, and he'll put it into beats if you're not getting it. And he'll do it with me, and he'll do it with Tom Cruise, and he'll do it with Jack Nicholson, and he'll do it with Andre the Giant, where if you're not getting it the way he hears it, he'll lay it out. Now, some people don't like that, but I'll say, hey, well, how do you want it? Because he'll hear it differently than people.
When I start a film, I know in my head how every line should sound. There is a musical aspect to the way the lines are read and to the shape of a scene and how it's almost orchestrated musically. And I have a certain way I hear it in my ear. Now, sometimes actors will bring new ideas to it and play the instrument slightly differently and be just as good and just as interesting. But oftentimes they're hitting what I refer to as clinkers. They don't have the right emphasis on the right words, and they're not getting the most out of a particular line, in which case I'll help them sometimes by giving them line readings. Most actors don't mind it. They don't care. I mean, because they know they're going to make it their own. Some actors, don't want you to give them line readings, so I don't do that for them. But the actors that I've worked with, that I've enjoyed working with the most, don't mind hearing a line reading, and they'll listen to it, and they'll make it. They always wind up making it their own anyway. So.
Even 20 for me. At my best, I could never defeat.
This was the matching festival. His hair's in every different position from every take. See, it's all over his head. Yeah, here's the thing about Rob. He'll say, I don't care what anything looks like. I cut for performance. Look at Mandy's hair there. Look where the hair is. Okay, now it cuts to Andre. What? Now it's in a different place. Now he's Bill Haley in the Comets. How did it get there? Then it'll be something else. I think in another shot, his hair was all over his head. For those, there are those freaks those freaky guys. Look, see, now it's not even a curl. Did you see that? Now it's not even a curl. Look. Oop. Great look in his eye. Blood tonight. No. He just cares about performance. It doesn't matter. But there are those people who sit home and go, if you notice, she's now eating pancakes. She started out the scene eating that thing. And on and on. They are just too wild. These trivia experts who look for things that are wrong.
There's no right way of telling a story. There's no right way of... Narrative is a piece of string. And you cut it where you want and end it. Where you begin it and you end it where you want. There's no right or wrong way. It's just what you believe in and what you can make an audience believe in. I guess the great commercial success in the history of this country is Gone with the Wind. You could tell Gone with the Wind as a half-hour TV show, two people sitting in a basement in a southern mansion talking about, oh, God, I hope Rhett will survive and rescue us. Will Scarlett be okay? I don't know. I think they're in love. Do you? I mean, you could do it that way if you wanted to. That's not the way Margaret Mitchell chose to do it. And a good thank God for that. But there's no right or wrong way of doing narrative. I don't even know what it is. It has a pulse to it. I'm coming more and more to believe this. Movies are only about story.
What makes Bill a great storyteller is that he has this intense loyalty to the story, to the spine of the story, but he can follow that spine without you ever knowing that he's doing it. So it seems imaginative, and it's funny, and it's exciting, and it's everything else, and it's as creative as anyone else. But somehow at the end, you've had a better time because he's taken you on this journey without deviating from the spine of the story much. So it's not just that he's aware of the importance of story, but it's that he can tell that story without you feeling that in any way, shape, or form anything formulaic is happening or anything is going on that is by the book.
I had him in the machine, and I walked into my office one day, and I thought, how am I going to get him out of this? And I got to my office, and I didn't know how I was going to get him out of it. And I, had coffee and read the papers and bullshitted around. And then I realized I wasn't going to get him out. I wrote Wesley lay dead by the machine. And I looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And the only time in my life this ever happened, I burst into hysterical tears. And I can still feel the heat of the tears. I went running to the bathroom to try and put water on my face. And I can still see my face all contorted and red. And it was an amazing moment for me. Because I hadn't, as I said, I'm instinctive. I don't know what I'm doing. But when I look at it now, I wonder what I was thinking, because what comes up, I must have had Miracle Max. I wouldn't have had Miracle Max. I wouldn't have had, any of that stuff. But I didn't know I was going to kill him. I absolutely had no idea that was going to happen. It was an amazing moment for me. It was, I guess, the single most emotional and best creative moment of my career. And it's just shocking to me even now. I didn't know you could do that. It was a wonderful thing for me.
Mel Smith comes in. He's sensational. We go, this is great. And we've got, $4 left in the budget, but it's fine because it's just this guy we don't know. And we get a call from the agent. Okay, if Mel can get, I don't know what the number was, but $15,000 a week, plus this, plus that. And we go, and then we found out he was a real guy. That he'd already established himself, and he was so good that we just made it work. But it was just one of those funny things that I guess he's famous.
He had a show in England called Alas, Smith and Jones. And it was got another guy named Jones and him, Smith, and they were a comedy duo, and they did, very smart British satire. And they were on, I think, once a week in England.
It's interesting watching talk shows in England, and people you've never seen are being treated the same way all the celebrities in the United States are being treated, but you have no idea who they are. I guess that's just a famous guy. It somehow puts celebrity in perspective.
We shot this at a place called Burnham Beaches, which is a woods very close to Heathrow Airport. And during the peak hours, there was a plane going overhead every 30 seconds. So here we are trying to recreate this kind of storybook, medieval, fairy tale forest. And, there's jumbo jets flying. It was like so insane to do this scene. We're in the pit of despair, and we're discovering at this point that we think Wesley is dead. And of course, this upsets the little boy, because how can he be dead? What do you mean he's going to be dead? Well, who's going to win? What happens to Humperdinck? You mean Humperdinck wins? He gets all worked up. First, we had to find the right little boy. A little boy who was a good actor, plus had some intelligence and could carry off the intelligence of the part. And Fred Savage was the little boy that we picked, and he turned out to be a big TV star. He went on to do The Wonder Years. At the time, though, I thought, well, this guy's perfect. And you know how when you cast a little boy, you never know what the experience is going to be like. But if you look at the parents and you see that they're good, decent people, you can pretty much figure that the son's going to be okay. And that was the case with Fred Savage. He had great parents, and he was a great little boy, and he's very smart, and he loved playing computer games, which he does in the movie.
There are a couple of big moments in this novel and movie for me. One of them is Wesley's death when the kid goes to pieces. I love that, and because I went to pieces when I killed Wesley. There are a lot of nutty things in it that are unusual, the deaths and whatever. But that's because everybody dies and everything I write. Everybody's sympathetic. I always kill off my most sympathetic character. It's horrible. I don't mean to do it. I just do it. I did it for my first novel on. It's just a terrible thing.
What? When Rob called me to say, I'd love you to be Miracle Max, I had not read the book. I was familiar with the book. I had heard about it. You haven't read The Princess Bride? It was, it was like those people who knew the 2,000-year-old man or Stan Freberg's America, sort of cult comedy piece, and said, you read it, right? You know it. Don't you know it by heart? And all that. I hadn't read the book. And then when I did, and he said, I want you to play Max. He's about 100 years old, maybe, and he's this little Jewish troll. And I said, what? You want me to do this? So I read it and said, wow, this is perfect. And then the script came in, and we hardly touched it. We just moved a few things around, and then Rob let me play around a little bit. And you can't get any better than that.
I've seen worse.
Mandy couldn't stop laughing. I started poking him. That's one of the few takes where Mandy's not like, hey. Rob said, hit him a little, hey. One time I played him like a musical instrument. And then Rob let me go once we had this scene. I said things like, oh, look who knows so much, mister, I can wear my hair like this because I have a sword. Then Andre was there. Andre didn't have a word in the scene, and a couple of times I turned to this huge man and said, come on, jump in. You got something to say, big fella? And I had just finished doing Saturday Night Live, and I had a great makeup man named Peter Montagna, and we started to get the face from Max. I wanted to look a little bit like my grandmother and Casey Stengel. Casey Stengel, of course, was the great old manager for the Yankees. He had this great droopy nose. My grandmother had great little cheeks and an attitude. And that's what the makeup really was I took my grandmother's face with photographs and photographs of Casey Stengel, and it sort of came out to be Miracle Max. And with all these pictures, that's how the character emerged. We were about 6 hours in makeup that day, and changed the look a few times, made the eyebrows a little bit bigger like John L. Lewis. And you put these all together, and boy, I've seen worse. It fits together.
There were a lot of ad libs in the Miracle Max scene. Billy's one of the great improvisational comedian types working, and you'll get new stuff every take. The hard part was for Carrie, who's supposed to be dead, to lie there. He literally hurt himself because he was trying not to laugh so hard and not to move, not to breathe, and he actually hurt his stomach or his ribs or something. Because Billy would just make these things up, and he'd have no idea he was about to say them. And it's not always easy to keep a dead body as opposed to a straight face. But he, Billy, I can't imagine anyone else doing this, because what brought him to life so much was that Billy just created a character and just kind of went off on a run.
I still have people come up to me, and these little film freaks, and will say to me, "I've seen worse. Have fun storming the castle," and little things. Those perceptive people who'll hear, and don't go in swimming for at least an hour, and they'll go a good hour.
There was a whole section where he talked about he was very disappointed with his son. He was a shepherd, and he was caught having sex with the sheep. And he was very upset with him because he says he's a former Viking, and it was terrible that he had been caught doing this. And there was a whole side story about him and his son, which we didn't have the time for.
I'm a way better writer than almost any actor that ever lived. And they're way better actors than I am. When you're working with people who have a dazzling sense of improvisation, it's insane not to take advantage of it.
And you shouldn't go in swimming after for at least, what?
An hour.
Yeah, an
A
hour.
good hour. Yeah.
Don't go swimming for an hour or a half an hour. That's so funny. God, that's one of the best lines I've ever been involved with.
Bye-bye.
The castle is just gorgeous, but there happened to be like this cloudy day, and the sun had broken through, and it was just moving along, and we could see it was just aiming for the castle, and just the shot you see there, the sun just happened to light up the castle perfectly, and 5 minutes later it was gone again, and it's just one of those lucky things.
We'll have to force feed him.
Has it been 15 minutes?
Andre the Giant's real name was Andrei Roussimoff, and he came from a small town in France. I think it was a town of 26 people. One family had 5 kids, another family had 5 kids, so there's 10. And the other 16 people included Samuel Beckett. We said, well, did you know him? He goes, oh, sure, he'd drive me to school sometimes. So we tried to figure out what conversations Samuel Beckett and Andre the Giant had.
And Rob came up with this notion that what they talked about was that Andre would talk to Beckett about symbolism in modern European literature, and Beckett would ask Andre about Hulk Hogan and strangleholds. But I mean, they're a marvelous couple.
A sight that always made me laugh was we'd go to lunch together, usually a table about 6 or 8 of us, and it'd be Rob and Mandy, Carrie, Andre, Carol Kane, also in makeup, 2 of us looking like little apple sculptures, and Andre at a table for lunch in the Shepperton Studios. And it used to make me laugh so hard that there was a giant and 2 elderly little Jewish gnomes, and Mandy looking like that. Oh, and Chris, of course. So, and there we were, and we would talk. And we would talk about, he was upset that wrestling was making him a villain at that point. And I'm not bad guy. I'm not bad guy. They were changing his character in the wrestling world.
Andre comes down one morning. He said, well, I had a tough night last night, boss. I said, oh, what happened? He says, well, I drank 12 bottles of wine, 3 bottles of brandy. I said, oh, my God. I mean, you okay? Did you get sick? He goes, no, I get a little tipsy, though. And he did everything on a much larger-than-life scale. In the old days, he used to drink 150 beers a day before he would start drinking his hard liquor. And then he went on the wagon a little bit as he got older, but he was an amazing, amazing guy.
His great passion was the day that the Nouveau Beaujolais came out, and Andre had to have a case of them and was looped like crazy, and fell asleep in the lobby of a hotel, I believe, and they had to cover him up with a rug in the lobby of the hotel because they couldn't move him. And some poor man, a Pakistani cab driver with a Renault, came to pick up the fare, and I cannot get him. Look at him. I cannot get him. I cannot pick you. I cannot put him in the cab. He would run up bar bills of $1,100, $1,200. Entire bottles. And in his hands looked like Mighty Joe Young with those when they would throw the let's see if the giant can drink. That's what it looked like with him. He was so moving to me, and the things that he talked about. He was very open about his physical. Yes, he was a big man, but he would die before he was 50. And it just, you're doing this over an omelet, and wasn't exactly light lunch patter. And he said that he had this ranch of 700 acres. He said he likes to walk with the animals because they don't look twice at him. It was just, it was poetic. It was this enormous human being just being so sweet and just so honest and touching that I started making notes that there should be the story about him.
Knowledge.
I grew up in Chicago, and there was a rabbi who I heard when I was young. He was the most famous rabbi in Chicago. I can't remember his name. And he had a speech impediment. And I remember hearing him say when I was very young, I think he said, Melwidge is a dweem with him a dweem. And I was a little kid. It's like when you're a little kid in school and you see something with their fly open, you get the giggles. And this was a serious occasion. And I remember dying not to laugh. It was so hard. And you squirrel stuff like that away. I remember when this book came out, several Chicagoans said, "How could you humiliate Rabbi so-and-so like that?" But I hadn't meant to. But it was just, he was famous. Now, he kept using words with an R. He didn't have to say Melwich is a dweem. He could have said it's a fantasy. He could say fantasy. He kept saying dweem. And it was just insanely funny.
Survivors, all you worst nightmares are about to come true.
Peter Cook, I got to know, he's now dead. He was the most brilliantly witty man I ever met, except that he didn't mean it. His mind was such that it came from a place. I was on a trip with him in Egypt, and I was another brilliant English mind, Stephen Fry. We're talking, the trip was about to end, and Peter said to Stephen, "What are you doing?" And you go back to London, and Stephen said, "I don't know, I expect commercials." And Peter said, "For what?" And Stephen said, "Oh, piles, I expect." And Peter said, "For or against." For or against was such a brilliant concept. The idea of writing up, and I had this image of a bunch of ad men trying to write a pro-pile commercial. And it was just this stuff that just came out of Peter that was so amazing. And he didn't mean for it to be funny. He was just this brilliant thing. But I remember that, for or against.
One of the reasons Rob Reiner doesn't spend more on films that he directs than he does is that he, in effect, edits in the script writing process. He very, very rarely will shoot a scene that doesn't end up in the film. We'll go over the script time and time and time and time again, looking for a quarter of pages, then looking for a line, then looking for a word. Not to make it one word shorter, but to make it one word better. If there's an extraneous word, if there's something that isn't quite right. And the result of that process is you don't have a lot of scenes that cost a lot of money to shoot sitting on a floor somewhere. Rob comes in on budget because you, like every director and producer, you break down the film into what you can shoot each day. And you say, yes, I can do this. This is a good day. This is a full day, but I can make it in that one day. You just add up all the days, add up all the money it costs to shoot those days, and that's your budget. It's an imperfect art, creating a budget, but you try and get in the area.
I must say that this is also ego-ridden, but I have my three heroes there, and one of them is dead. One of them is a revenged Phil Spaniard, and the third is this giant who likes rhymes. I mean, it's just this marvelous trio. What can't they do?
My name is Inigo Montoya.
Chris Guest is one of the most brilliant actors I've ever worked with. I mean, he works in such a fine way. As I described before, I was sitting at a dinner after a screening, and I had forgotten that he was in the film. I looked over, and I was so happy that he'd come as a friend to support the film. And I forgot that he's actually in the film. He works in such a fine way. It's like he works in miniatures. You know, these great artists that draw these incredible paintings on scrimshaws, you know. That's the way I look at Chris. I mean, it's the most delicate, fine kind of work. I mean, there's no pandering in any of his performance. It's all organic and simple and real and connected. He's brilliant beyond belief. He's one of the most brilliant actors I've ever worked with, and a brilliant mind and satirist and writer. And he's a great guy. I think audiences do want stories. I think that it's become lazy for the filmmaker because the audience. Here's the thing: an audience will sit down to a meal and they can have cotton candy, and that's good, or they can have a nice steak with vegetables, and that's good too. It doesn't mean you should only have one and not have the other. You can have both, But I think what happens a lot of times is that filmmakers get lazy and they figure, well, if the audience just wants cotton candy, that's all we're going to do. We're just going to spin out some cotton candy and keep throwing it out there. And the audience takes it in, and it's fun, and it tastes good, and it's sweet, and it disappears and dissolves into nothing.
If you don't get with it, you probably have gone by now. But if you get with it, it's just, you're not going to do really, I don't think. I can't do any better than this as a storyteller. And this is, for me, just wonderful stuff here. That sounds arrogant, but it is for me. I mean, Mandy's just marvelous. He's just clearly done.
Here's another scene that was very unexpected when, after all the comedy and the adventures where no one gets hurt, here's a knife right to the gut, and the audience just gasped and then cheered at the end. But the comedy turns into adventure, which turns into serious dramatic scene and then back to comedy. It's a very delicate balance that I think Rob pulled off wonderfully.
Part of the reason I love this, though, is because it's not the ordinary. This is not the fifth swashbuckler I wrote. This is the only one I ever wrote and probably ever will, and it works for me for whatever reason, because it's connected to my daughters in my head, and they liked it, and all the rest of it.
Princess Bride is one of those movies that's a perennial. It's witty, it's funny, it's for adults, it's for kids. It's an unusual movie, and that is so well respected, and even more so, it's a constant. As the years go by, it's not, I don't want it. It's a perennial, and that's what's wonderful about it. You know, you can watch it with your kids and still laugh yourself and not feel you're going to be insulted. You know, I mean, it's not. It's very smart stuff, and you know, it's a little classic.
Wesley, why won't you hold me?
Gently.
Not like this. That's all you can think to say. Gently.
Gently.
I think there's a very strong father and son relationship in many of Rob's pictures. It's there in this movie. It's definitely there in A Few Good Men, Stand By Me. And I think that's, you know, he was working that out. And done, that's what art is. You use your life and throw it up there and, you know, get rid of it if you can, you know. If it's bothering you, at least let it mean something to somebody else and, you know, put it in a poetic way. And, you know, after a while you stop grinding on it and it's gone.
Well, most of the films that I do have some kind of personal connection with something that I've experienced or a main character that I can identify and live through. I love satire. I was raised with satire. My father was, in a show of shows and Caesar's Hour, and I had my own improvisational theater group, and I wrote for the Smothers Brothers, and it's the way in which I was raised. You know, my whole life was populated with the likes of Sid Caesar and Mel Brooks and Neil Simon and Norman Lear and Aaron Rubin and Mel Tolkien, and Larry Gelbart and Joe Stein, some of the greatest comic minds of all time, you know, came through my house.
This is the big moment, the big scene for me and everything in this thing, I guess, along with Wesley's death, is the you killed my father, prepare to die.
Anything you want. I want my father back, son of a bitch.
The film The Princess Bride is about a sick little boy who gets a visit from his grandfather, whom he doesn't want to see, and is read a book, The Princess Bride, by this grandfather. And as a result of sharing this story together, the two of them are brought closer together. That's what the film The Princess Bride is about. The book within the film is a whole other thing, and that's the fairy tale of Buttercup and Wesley and Prince Humperdinck and Count Rugen and Fezzik and Inigo and all that. And that's a whole other thing. I don't, people ask me all the time, did you ever think of just telling the story of The Princess Bride without the wraparound or without the interruptions of the grandfather reading to the grandson? And I said, no, it never crossed my mind, because to me, what makes it work is it grounds the picture in reality. The picture has a reality. We're never for 1 second saying that what's going on in Gilder and Florin is real. It's a fairy tale. It's being read from a book, and we are constantly reminding the audience that it is being read from a book. And people said, well, aren't you worried that it's going to take the audience out of the film, out of the story of The Princess Bride? And I said, no, I don't think it will. I think it's going to enhance it, and it's going to make it more fun. And I think that's what it did.
It's about imagination. It's about the little boy reading a book that makes him see it. It's about those great moments when your grandparents would come over to visit, and it was, when relatives had a great charisma about them, and it's about what Bill said. It's about back when I was a kid, television was called books, and that's lost today. That's lost in the very simple aspect of a parent or someone reading to their children is a very profound thing. And I think that gets lost in today's society. I think, we keep hearing about no one reads anymore. If you look at libraries, books checked out are way down. People don't. We have this remote control, and we look at television. And that gives us our news, and that gives us our stories, and that gives us things that we care about. This is a book that opens this kid up, and that's what's profound about it to me. Also, is I remember the first time I read Treasure Island, and I could see everybody, and I read it again 2 days later, and then I read it again, and I read it again, and every so often I'll pick it up because I don't want to forget what made me start to visualize things that weren't happening and visualize characters that the writer was imagining too. That's the great thing about literature, and the great thing about The Princess Bride is that Rob made you see what the kid was seeing. And it's very much the boy's point of view about what the story is, what it meant to him, and what he was seeing when he was reading, that I always found really, very moving about this piece.
Rob and Goldman, the rest of the cast, it wasn't maudlin and it wasn't sentimental. They didn't lay it on. It was funny. And it was never too funny. It was just funny enough. It was always credible, always believable. You followed the story. It took you back to when you were a kid, when you would believe things like that. And everybody wants to believe that.
The shot is she was lifted by two guys just above frame, just above camera, and dropped maybe isn't that a pretty shot? Hello, there she is dropping. And that was Robin. And the first time we did it, I was there, and Andre turned the color of chalk, and he just almost dropped her. He staggered. It was so shocking because here he was, arguably the strongest man in the world, and Robin probably weighed a button. And you could see this blinding pain go through, and his knees buckled. You weren't used to Andre doing that.
Have you ever considered piracy? You'd make a wonderful Dread Pirate Roberts.
So here's a shot they're riding up. That's not Andre. Andre would have killed the horse.
I do remember going to the screening of Princess Bride, and perhaps more than any other picture I'd ever been in, knew less about what I was going to see and was more delighted. I thought that was an absolutely flawless picture, without a blemish.
One of the things that people fall in love with is it's just so unique. It's so unexpected. And it involves you in the romance, it involves you in the adventure, but it's also a comedy, but the comedy doesn't undercut the peril. I just think it's a very unusual film that in someone else's hands other than Rob might have fallen off one side or the other. I think it's really like walking a tightrope, the tone of this film.
I was working in L.A. with Rob, and I got the idea of ending the movie that way. And I called up and I screamed. I said, listen, I've got the ending. As you wish. And he said, great, we'll use it. That was it. It was just one of those notions, I don't know how it worked.
Grandpa, maybe you could come over and read it again to me tomorrow.
As you wish.
I think Peter Falk was surprised at the film he was in because all he did was come in and sit in a little bedroom set for 3 days and talk to Fred Savage, a kid he'd never seen before. And the end of the film, when Peter Falk says, as you wish, the entire audience just wells up. And he was really, I think, taken quite strongly by the film. I guess that happens sometimes when you do small parts in films. You're not quite sure what the overall film is going to turn out like. And so it's nice when someone whose work you respect at the end of the day really feels good about the film.
I love credits like this I love it when you see who the people are and whatever, because you don't know for the most part who they are. And I hate credits. I wish they would mandate that said all credits were in the back.
Well, Mark Knopfler had done this incredible score for this picture with Burt Lancaster, and I think Peter Riegert was in it. And now the name is just jumping out of my head. Oh, yeah, Local Hero, right. Local Hero, which I loved. It was a great film. And the score of Local Hero was so distinct and so original, and had such an original feel. Randy Newman would have been another choice for me, you know, because they just look at things a little bit more oddly, you know. They come at it from a different angle, and I thought, well, here's a film that's certainly going to be quirky and weird, and you know, a mixture of things. And he seemed like the perfect guy. So I called him, and he read the script and he went nuts for it, you know. And he thought, wow, this is great. And he said to me, I'll do it. And he said, the only demand I'm making on you is that you find a place for the cap that you wore in Spinal Tap to be somewhere in the movie. So if you look closely, you'll see behind the little boy on his bedside that's hanging on a lamp, the cap that I wore in Spinal Tap.
This did happen once upon a time when things were not so complex.
And then Willie DeVille's song comes in, and it was nominated for an Oscar. And poor Willie, on the Oscar night, when he sang a song, he forgot the lyrics to his own song.
Look, I'm trapped inside my own skin. And I know the surprises, I know the twists, I know what was hard for me, what was not hard for me. You hope when you do something. Every time you start, there's a great character in a Tennessee Williams play called Camino Real, the whore who every moonrise she's a virgin. And you hope you're virgins each time. You hope each time you make a movie or are involved with the making of one, that it's going to bring memories to people, because that's the business we're in. And sometimes they do work, and most of the time they don't. I mean, I really like a lot of this movie. And most movies you say, well, Maverick has a blink that I think is okay. You know, it was a successful film, but, you know, Misery has a lot of stuff that's terrific because of Kathy Bates' amazing performance. But for the most part, it's not what you want. You do the best you can. And you hope sometimes. I mean, I've had the two that I love, this and Butch was a worldwide hit. This was not. But this is a wonderful flick.
You know something? We love all our children equally. No, I love The Princess Bride. I mean, it's more, again, for the experience making it than anything else. I lived in London, in England, for 6 months. I had a great life experience. It was like I said, one of my favorite books of all time. And it holds a very special place for me.